Yeah, it's time for another episode of the Comic Book Kaiju. I am one of your hosts, Vactor. I'm here with the Big Largeness himself, Chris Eaton. How you doing, sir?
Doing well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing excellent because I'm talking to two of my favorite pals, especially my favorite wrestling buddies. My buddy. Not only Chris Eaton, but that laughter you heard was coming live from the planet of Memphis, Mr. Markus Seaberry.
Yeah, what's up, baby? What's up, baby? You know what I'm saying? I'm anything, you feel me?
Hustle.
Had to say hometown
And might I add, Maine.
Seabury is hustle, Chris Eaton is flow. So we are here, the Comic Book Kaiju. Also, if you did not know, we have a sister podcast called the Kick Out Kaiju, where we talk all about wrestling in the professional manner. That is a commentary podcast where we most likely talk about a wrestling match that you have seen, dear listener or dear watcher, if you're watching this. And I wanted to let everybody know that Chris Eaton and Markus Seaberry are doing a fantastic job on the Kick Out Kaiju. So definitely check them out week to week. I've had to take a leave of absence from the show, but I will hopefully be back soon. All right.
This week we're actually in memorial for Antonio Inoki, who passed away this past week. We're going to sort of commentate over the Ric Flair versus Antonio Inoki match from Collision in Korea. So that'll be a fun watch.
Yeah.
Very nice. But we are going to be talking because Mr. Chris Eaton and Markus Seaberry have such a love for wrestling, the professional wrestling. Let me ask Mr. Chris Eaton about this comic that he chose specifically to talk about. Mr. Eaton, why don't you tell us why?
First of all, I'm sorry. Second of all, literally because wrestling.
Yeah.
WCW never really had the merchandising foothold that WWE had. The one thing that I remember as a kid growing up was I got a few issues of this WCW comic book, and I never saw a WWF comic book till much later.
Yeah, like
so I was.
They had, like, I think they were what was it, like Voyage Communications or somebody, you know, the people that used to publish Valiant, like, yeah. So, because like I remember one where Big Boss Man was fighting the Mountie out in the swamp or some crap like that.
What?
But yeah, like they didn't have comics that I would see in Kroger while I was, thumbing through my Pro Wrestling Illustrators and Nintendo Powers on the
shout out Nintendo Power.
Yeah. So yeah, like they had.
So yeah, I was going through some old boxes from my move a few months ago and found this couple of issues that I had of the WCW comic. I was like, I wonder if this is any good. And so I found the nearest truck that happened. They had hit a bump and they had fallen off the back of it. So I picked all the issues that I didn't have up off the ground and read them all in sequence just to see, how they were. And I thought, since we had around that time we had started Kick Out Kaiju, I thought this would be a really cool sort of tie-in episode between Kick Out Kaiju and Comic Book Kaiju to discuss what are probably, to my knowledge, the first wrestling comic. It might not be, but I'm not aware of one that's earlier. Marcus, are you?
Yeah, like I'm saying, cause like I was seeing the WWF stuff like late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, okay. See, I wasn't aware of that.
And then technically now, you want to talk about the first wrestling comic, you got to go back to Kinnikuman, which was a manga which came to America as
Ultimate Muscle, and Muscle, right.
Because that started in like the mid to late 70s.
Okay. Well, this was the first one that I knew about, and the first one that sort of came across my field of influence. So I thought it'd be a cool thing to look at here, as you know, since we're all comic aficionados and wrestling aficionados, to try to, you know, see do they hold up, what was good, what was bad. And as I said at the top, I'm sorry, but we'll get into it.
All right, cool. So let me go first with my experience with the WCW comics, and then we're gonna make a roundabout way. We're gonna go Seabury and then back to Chris Eaton. This was new to me. I did not know these existed. These 12 issues that spanned from 1992 to 1993.
To be fair, I'm still not sure they do.
But the thing that I had a great time with was putting myself back into 1992 Vactor. Now, 1992 Vactor, to put it in perspective, was 10 years old. When this was happening, Spider-Man had just turned 30. Mm-hmm. That was like something that when I saw the ads in this, I was like, oh man, this is crazy, because I think about how old Spider-Man is now, and to go back to then, and I was like, oh yeah, that it reminded me that was kind of my grounding. That was my lightning rod. Oh yeah, Spider-Man was how all of my comic book knowledge gets tied together of, oh, this character is Spider-Man's friend. This character is Spider-Man's love interest. Like everything comes back to Spider-Man.
Spider-Man is your point of reference.
Yes. So that was kooky to me to be like, oh, this is 92. And then I put myself into that 1992 mindset, and a flood of memories came back. Like I said, I've never read these comics before, but in 1992, I remember the ads in the comics. I remembered all the products that were advertised. I remember the smell of the comics and the paper, the feel of the paper. All of these things came back, and I was reading it digitally. So it was just like a time capsule for me when I was going through this, and I was like fascinated of 1992. And at the same time, not only had I never read this before, but I was always a WWF and then WWE guy. Like I never had a foothold into WCW. At the time, I was always like, oh, that's the other guys. And Sting was the only person I knew from WCW. I didn't know anyone else. It's crazy the amount of wrestlers that I knew from WWE that were in this. And I was like, I had no idea that they also wrestled in WCW. Even Jim Ross. Now I knew Jim Ross came from WCW, but he's my favorite announcer of all time. And so having him in the books, all of these things were great nostalgia things for me as I was going through this. And it was also a different time in wrestling. This also fits right into our Kick Out Kaiju, where we kind of analyze the psychology of wrestling. The mindset of the babyface and the heel was everything. It was like either you were good or bad. That was it. There was no gray. Everyone was, if you're a heel, you spit on kids, you talk bad about their moms, like you do everything to have the crowd hate you. And then if you're a babyface, you are Captain America, like you are drinking milk and apple pie, and everything is, you are 100%.
Saying your prayers, eating your vitamins.
Yes, 100%.
That was that's what they call kayfabe, right? Like,
oh yeah,
you live the gimmick, you protect the gimmick at all costs. Like you know, like you could be cool, like you could be a good guy and cool with a bad guy, but like y'all ain't finna go to freaking the Waffle House,
right?
Because he's a heel.
And that was
as a Jim.
That was, as a kid, like that was sacred to me. And it was just like, it was great going back to that time period and then thinking about how wrestling has evolved to today, and the mindset of what, you know, the type of things that where the curtain is pulled back a little bit and we were able to see behind the scenes. And then the wrestlers are real people. We're able to see them outside of the gimmicks or outside of their characters. And especially with social media, being able to see behind the scenes, and sometimes a little bit too much when we see them in adult films and things like that. But
what you did.
Nonetheless,
social media has been a great thing and a terrible thing for pro wrestling.
100%. But I had a great time going through, like I said, the comic itself was also from 1992. Like the way that it was written, the art style, the coloring, a lot of these things, it's like, okay, that was a time period. That was a museum piece or a time
thing
capsule
that happened.
Yeah, from 92. So I was like, all right, I respect it. I remember this time period, but I don't necessarily want to go back to this time period. I like where I'm at right now. So that was my experience with these 12 WCW comics. It was, man, all this stuff coming back to me from 92, and then also kind of a new thing for me. There was something new because I wasn't into WCW growing up. I've watched recaps and things, reviews online and things of that nature, of documentaries and things, but I didn't have the, like, that love, I think, of WCW like I do for WWE. So that's how I approached it. So I'm very curious, Mr. Markus Seaberry, what was your experience with these WCW comics?
First, I'm gonna take it back to 92. I was 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And every day was kind of hellish because I was a black nerd in the 80s and 90s, man. It ain't like
It's a rough life.
You know, now, ooh boy, it was like I was like, I walked so they could run.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying. All you black nerds, I'm a OG. I took the lumps for you. But now, I had a cousin, Mario, who was also kind of black and nerdy, and we both like comics, and we had like history together, and he was like, yeah, man, WCW got a comic. So he bought issue 1. I read it. Interesting, like, kind of the timeline of the comic was about maybe a year behind.
Roughly,
yeah, like roughly a year behind the actual show, because by the time this comic started, Big Van Vader was champion, but this was showing kind of the end of Lex Luger's reign, and they probably cut out a lot of his reign because they knew that he had signed with WBF/WWF, like, him shine in this book. And so I had read the first 2 issues. Then I don't know, like, maybe my cousin kept getting them and didn't tell me, because, like, I just didn't love it. Like, the art, even for 92, man, that art wasn't great. I'm X-Men and Spider-Man and stuff. I'm reading, I'm seeing like Todd McFarlane or Jim Lee, Marks, like, this was kind of, And then I remember, though, like the next year, because it started when I was a sophomore, my cousin Mario was a freshman. But then the next year, he's a sophomore and I'm a junior. He's like, yo, I got WCW issue 12. And I'm like, all right, bring it. Let me read. So I borrowed it from, because, like, I know he was a big Vader fan, and, like, that most of the issues,
as anyone should be.
Yeah. Most of the issue was kind of based on a real life thing. Vader came in and kind of just demolished Sting and got the heavyweight belt. Plus,
but at the end, it's okay, because Sting goes back in the back and eats cake with a kid in the locker room. Justin, you didn't believe it. You didn't believe me when I told you that's what happened at the end of the comic, did you?
I did not.
Yeah, man. So, like, even though I didn't care for it as a WCW fan, I was sad that it ended. Like, I would see crazy little issues, like all of the middle stuff about, Dark Sting or Black Sting or whatever, and I was like, oh wow, this is weird. That never happened, because, like, man, Sting was like good guy's good guy, or like a face in face. He was just like, pretty much once he turned face, like in UWF, he pretty much stayed face until like the 2000s. Like they tried to turn him heel in WCW, and it was terrible.
I was actually going to ask you about that. I was going to text you when I was reading it, and I was like, what? I don't remember hearing about Dark Sting or Black Sting. I was like, what is this?
All this fans fully made up, man.
Okay.
that was just them embellishing. But
Gotcha.
now all those people were in, WCW, like your Rick Rudes and Rick Steiner, Scott Steiner, all those guys. Johnny B. Bad, who just you may know as Wild Man Mark Merrill. That was his identity in WWF. Yeah, like I said, all that was there. Ron Simmons went on to be Farouk and AP. Yeah, like all those guys were there. But they just started. I guess they embellished a lot because of where they started. Like I said, they started with Luger, but they were like, look, man, this dude has straight up signed with, other people and everybody knew it. So I guess they were like, hey, let's just run wild. And at the end, they were like, well, let's bring it back to when Vader beat Sting. And, because it's funny, like also, like, during the course of reading this, now, Ron Simmons is spotlighted a lot in these comics. And
God bless them for that.
Yeah, God bless for that, because he's awesome. He's amazing. He is badass, and he's a Heisman Trophy winner. Put some respect on Ron Simmons' name. But also, like, around, like, during the course of this run, like in real WCW time, Vader loses the belt to Ron Simmons briefly, like for like 3-4 months, Then like Vader beats him like right before right at the end of '92 and gets it back, and so like it was just interesting to see, like, oh yeah, Ron Simmons, and just kind of seeing him in this guys, because like I first became familiar with Ron Simmons like watching UWF, and Dr. Jeff Steve Wills brought him in, and I thought he was a big strong black dude. I thought he was cool. I was like, yes, so like. And yeah, it brought me back. Like I said, I remember seeing all those ads and stuff, because like, I was like a straight up Marvel zombie back then. But DC, I might have fooled with like some Justice League International, like Batman, or maybe a little Superman. I was just like, yeah. So like, I definitely saw all those ads in other comics, and like I said, it just brought me back. And like, it's silly, it's bad good, it's even it was
one word, bad good.
Yeah, because like I had never just read it in its entirety, and which I did yesterday. And I said,
what's crazy is this is 20 years old at this point. We are now commenting on this from 2022, and this is 92. This is 30 years old. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 30 years old. Like I said, I was 15 going on.
Repeat 16. After me. The 90s were 10 years ago.
Dang. That's what it feels like for real. 100%. It feels like the 90s just happened to be.
I know, man, dude. I am like spitting distance at 50. So trust me, I am well aware of age. It's all around me.
Yeah. And another thing, Seabury, not to cut you off, another thing that always fascinates me, the beginning of one decade always has that bleed over from the last decade. So with this one, you could see the 80s fashion. You could see the rap stereotypes, especially the rappers, like the way that, like, just the way that their characters are portrayed, and then their raps specifically. It definitely felt 80s, didn't feel 90s to me. But that's because anytime you're transitioning to the next decade, you're going to have that bleed over where they haven't defined that decade yet. That comes later. So that was something that stood out to me as well, was the 80s-ness of this 92. And they were probably writing this maybe in 91 or early 92, like late 91 or early 92. So that also stood out to me. Seabury, did any of the rap cliches stand out to you?
Yeah, man. Dude, let me tell you something. In okay, I can speak for the black people in my neighborhood and in my surrounding area. We never popped for PN News. We were just like, he whack, dude. Like, he just corny.
Right.
And I think that other little guy was fictional. I don't think he was a real wrestler.
Oh, okay.
No.
Punch Fresh. Yeah, I think that was.
It's not a bad ring name, though.
It is. But he looked like, I don't know. He looked like a watered down LL Cool J or something.
Oh, yeah.
With
Yeah.
tango and chains. And I was just like, I ain't gonna front. I found him the most annoying of the two bad rappers. I was just like this guy. And I was just like, okay, like whoever wrote this was probably listening to Nirvana or something, because I was like, they know these aren't good lyrics. I was just like, oh wow. But but fortunately, neither one of them had a whole lot of page time in the whole 12 issues. So I kind of just was like, that was the time. That was what they thought. Got past that because, like, I mean, I'm sorry. Again, I'm near 50, so I'm used to, people not of the culture trying to showcase the culture and failing miserably. Nah, I'm my first rodeo.
Yeah, so that was definitely a blast from the past. Now, Miss Chris Eaton, as you recommended these, this was not your first time reading these, right?
No.
Okay.
It was my first time reading some of it.
Okay.
I think I had probably the first half. I think I had like 1 through 6, maybe.
Gotcha.
So I'd read that. I had not read the back half.
Gotcha.
I do want to say real quick about PN News. For those of you listening or watching that have no clue what we're talking about, Google PN News, and if it doesn't come up, PN News was a very large, very Caucasian man wearing a thick rope gold chain with a flat bill hat on and a singlet, on the belly of which it said yo baby, yo, going around. And that was some white person's idea of what rap was. That's what happens when that happens. And yeah, I thought it was crappy when I was a kid watching wrestling, and it was. Now some random things that I had just thoughts from reading the comic.
Yeah.
First of all, like, and I think I sent this to you guys earlier. There's moves that they call in the comics that are not the moves that are drawn. I think in one issue, I think it's issue 3, maybe it's issue 1. The Steiners do what's supposed to be a spike pile driver, and the way the man lands is clearly a power bomb. That's just wrestling nerd, attention to detail stuff. There's another one where PN News again jumps off the top and he's like spread all the way out, and then there's no way that he lands from that position like he lands in the next page. So it's interesting. I want to say this: the best issue of the entire 12 issue run is issue number 2. And I want to highlight this one in particular. Issue number 2. Now, issue number 1 is a setup. You've got Lex Luger's title run. You got some Ron Simmons stuff in there, some Steiner stuff in there. Issue 2 says, heck with all that. And we open on an aircraft carrier. Or no, it's not an aircraft carrier. I'm sorry, it's a cruise ship. And we open with Sting wrestling some jobber.
Oh, that's
like. Go ahead, Seabury.
Yeah, that's issue 3.
Issue 3, my bad. Issue 3, thank you. Opens with him wrestling some lumberjack. And of course getting the win. And there's this internal monologue that's thought bubbles like, Sting is talking to himself constantly in this book, and it's that old comic of I'm going to describe exactly what's going on and what I'm doing. And he's on the trail of someone called the Ghoul, and they're at one point he says, at least this won't be as hard as my last match, and there's a little star next to it, like look down in the panel for like see last issue, and it doesn't say anything. There's a panel there for it to be, and it's just a blacked out rectangle. So that's wonderful. Cactus Jack is in this issue, looking absolutely nothing like Mick Foley. They draw this man like he's a wall, like literally a whole wall. Like Mick Foley is like 6'3", I think, and they draw. This is something that happens in the whole run of this comic. With big dudes, they have a problem with scale for sure, and I don't know if that's on purpose or if it's accidental, but like they draw Mick Foley like he is 7 feet wide and 16 feet tall and about 582 pounds. Like, it's terrible. And it happens the same thing with PN News, who looks like he's bigger than it's possible to be, and Vader, which I understand with Vader because it's Vader, but still looking like he's, again, 17 feet wide and 587 pounds. So the art is kind of a lot in this series. Now, as far as the story goes, as Marcus said, it's about a year-ish ahead of the show, and I think the Ghoul, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't ever an actual thing that I remember on TV. I do remember a similar storyline involving a character called the Black Scorpion that ended up being Ric Flair. In the comic, the Ghoul ends up being Ravishing Rick Rude, who takes the title from Sting, and at the behest of Paul Heyman, Paulie Dangerously, and the Dangerous Alliance. But it was so cool. You got to see the Diamond Stud, which, if any of you guys know, that's Scott Hall, and he does hit the razor's edge, even though they don't call it that. You see Steve Austin, all these people that would eventually come to greater heights later on. One thing that I noticed, though, in 92, I mean, we're not far removed from the Jim Crockett days in 92.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
right.
There's a few years, but it's not far off. So I'm surprised that this comic even really exists, considering the deficiencies that WCW had with their marketing. That's interesting in and of itself. But man,
dude, Marvel were licensed whores.
Yeah, that's fair.
That is some other stuff that was popping with Marvel back then. Like, they started a Kid and Play comic in 91, like a year
for real.
Yes, and like the cartoon had ended. They were like, "Hey,
wait, hold on. We're gonna have to underline that real quick. There was, sorry, listener, to depart from this, but there was a Kid and Play cartoon.
Yeah, dude. I interviewed the guy who created it. His name's John Semper. He was also one of the main creative forces behind the '90s Spider-Man cartoon, and he wrote the Kid and Play movie Class Act. Okay. Yes, there was a Kid and Play cartoon, but the licensed Marvel comic comes out like after the cartoons ended its run, and it's like, but hey, here's Kid and Play. I think there was some kind of comic like based about hip hop that had called Breaking the Chain or something, that had like a companion audio tape with it, narrated by KRS-One.
I am learning things.
I'm saying? Dude, I'm telling you, they were licensed whores in the late 80s, early 90s. This little random poet dude named Street Poet Ray, he had a they was just, man, it was crazy, dude. Just any little tie-in that they could think of. Shoot. Also around the same time as WCW, Marvel did an adaptation of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey with Ep Jordan doing art. Yeah, and then they started doing a Bill and Ted comic. Like, dang. Yeah, dude. Like they was all about that licensing money, man. Marvel, give it to me, license. Oh, you want to make a comic? Okay, cool. And then also this is also on the heels of like Barbie and Barbie fashion and Mighty Mouse,
right.
Yeah, man. That's just what Marvel did, man.
Dang.
So to get back to issue 3, because I don't mean to no sell that, Marcus. That's all really interesting, and I am gonna have to check out the KRS-One thing because I'm a huge fan. But so Sting goes on this whole detective. It's basically like a bad issue of Batman, except it's Sting and there's less clothes because he's a wrestler. And like he's wearing more clothes to go dancing in the club that night with Missy Hyatt than he is to investigate this plot to blow the ship up. And there's a tag team involved, and there's these guys in trench coats that Cactus Jack pays off, right? And Sting starts fighting them, and it's just dudes in wrestling trunks with overcoats on, which is like the creepiest thing I've ever heard in my life.
But that's what the Young Pistols wore to the ring.
I know, it's just dumb, is what I'm saying.
Oh. It does look dumb as hell in like real life situations. Like
yes, and instead of like actually fighting, they're putting wrestling moves on each other, but outside the context of a wrestling match. And I don't know if you know this, Vactor, but wrestling logic and fight logic are not the same thing. So
right.
If you can track down WCW World Championship Wrestling issue number 3, you don't need issue number 1. You don't need issue number 2, issue number 3. And if you don't want to read any other issue, that's fine. But read issue number 3 because it's amazing.
And as a Southern wrestling fan, I was glad to see Tracy Smothers. I'm like,
yes, you do get to see.
I'm Tracy like, this freaking Tracy Smothers.
Yes, man. Well, I think that's a pretty good discussion on World Championship Wrestling Volume 1, which I don't think there was ever a Volume 2.
Volume only.
It was issues
only. Like I said, man, if you want to read some better wrestling stuff, deal with Kanikuman, aka Muscle or Ultimate Muscle in America, just there's several different little independent stuff, like what is it, Headlock, or different independent.
For sure. I wanted to outline those. Thanks for saying that.
Even Do a Powerbomb
is fantastic. Do a Powerbomb is fantastic. There's a little indie book called Crimson Cage, which is a retelling of Hamlet set in 1986 New Orleans pro wrestling. It's really good. I'm trying. Super Pro KO is a manga.
Yes. 3 volumes. Yes,
3 volumes.
Freaking awesome.
Really good. So there is good wrestling comics out there, especially Headlocked. Check that series out. It's amazing. But yeah, there's good out there. The Comic Book History of Pro Wrestling by Aubrey Sitterson.
Yes,
fantastic. Yes. Really good history, actually good history of the wrestling business. Can't recommend that enough either. Marcus, can you think of any others at the moment?
There was one that Jim Cornette, I think he narrated and kind of co-wrote. I'm like blanking on the name, but like it was kind of similar to the Comic Book History of Pro Wrestling. It was a little more territorial. So yeah, man, like, but our point is, just like with most things, the genre of wrestling comics is vast and wide, and there are varying degrees of quality. But everything that we just named is stuff that is more high quality. But I mean, like I said, this was a lark. This was cool to kind of go back to and joke about. Although, guys, I gotta regret, man. I wanted the unmasking of like the Ghoul scene. I mean, he pretty much told who he was, but I was like, I wanted the mask to come off.
Yeah, there was a lot of missing pieces in between the panels, because the next panel they had him fully clothed, and then the next panel he's in his full ring attire, Rick Rude. the mask is off. Like it's like two different people, almost like
with the whole ghoul onesie in his hand.
Yeah, you switch and it's like, wait a minute, what happened? There was a couple of times where I was reading it and I was like, am I missing a panel? Did I miss a page or something? Like, what's going on here? So that was something with the ghoul where his unmasking was not shown, but that would have been a cool reveal, Seabury, like a Spider-Man taking his mask off type of panel.
And also, like, I was glad it was a Dangerous Lines because, like, when I was casually watching WCW, the Dangerous Lines was kind of running roughshod. I didn't see a lot of it, but, like, it just looked so cool. I mean, you had Beautiful Bobby Eaton, Arn Anderson, Stunning Steve Austin, Ravishing Rick Rude, Paulie at him, Scott Hall, aka the Diamond Stud, and Medusa up in that thing, or Alundra Blaze, a lot of WWE.
I know her.
Yeah, like, man, I just feel like that faction isn't talked about enough, man.
It's not.
Like, I really need like a little doc or something on them, the WWE just throw on Peacock, man. Cause you got people like Scott Hall and Steve Austin, who like, and even Paul Heyman with ECW, who like really went on to change the course of wrestling, man.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I'd watch that for sure. And you know what else I would watch is Mr. Markus Seaberry reviewing movies on YouTube. Mr. Seaberry, why don't you tell them what the latest movie you reviewed was?
Let's see. All right. I have a movie review show in conjunction with On Location Memphis called Sin of Sundry. I think the last review that I had go up was 3,000 Years of Longing.
Ah, yes. That's right.
And also, a little bit before that, we did a big kind of round table-ish deep dive, spoiler-filled review of The Woman King. So watch the movie first, then go watch that one because we break it all the way down. So yeah, man, and you can find Sin of Sundry on Location Memphis' Facebook page and on the On Location Memphis YouTube channel. So, please check it out and support.
Yeah. Miss Chris Eaton, where can they find you on the internet this week?
Well, they can find me, as always, on this fine podcast, but also on our sister podcast, The Kick Out Kaiju. This past week, we just put up a commentary over a match from 2003 between the Great Muta and Shinya Hashimoto. Fantastic. Very Western style Japanese match. So check that out. I already gave the announcement about what our next week's episode is going to be. They can catch me there. You can also catch me on TikTok at CBK_Eaton.
Yeah.
And on Twitter at Chris Eaton.
Oh, yeah. All right, my friends, thank you very much for listening to the Comic Book Kaiju. You can always check us out on YouTube or wherever your favorite podcasts are found. And I want to let everybody know that we love comics, and you should too.